Before we break into this episode of What Spoilers, we're going to take approximately 60 seconds once again to tell you about a really cool fan film that we were pretty excited about. Came out recently. It was produced and co-starred in by our friend Matt. It's called Binding the Shattered Harp. It's a fan film inspired by the world of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. We wanted to direct you to his YouTube and Patreon.
Yeah, Matt Wolf has produced the short Binding the Shattered Harp. We've talked about it before. It's a great view. I just rewatched it before we recorded, and I love the overhead shots and the way the wind.
Super cool that people can do that with drones now.
Totally. He takes the whole opening paragraph with the wind goes through the mountains and through this way and that way and visualizes it in a really cool way in the beginning of this thing.
Yeah.
Great opening paragraph. And yeah, if you want to support him, he's making some fan films. His Patreon is patreon.com/Sakan, Sakan. And go support him. Give him a couple of bucks a month to help him make some more of these fun films.
And since you're probably holding your phone right now, just YouTube Binding the Shattered Harp. Check it out. It's a fan short based on Wheel of Time. You'll probably like it if you're listening to this podcast.
And if you want to see a buff guy demonstrate how to properly use a skillet shirtless, go check out his Patreon page. It's right there. It's right there. Go check it out.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Chapter 18 of The Shadow Rising. Into the Ways. And our symbol is the Avendosora leaf.
It's not just the Avendosora leaf. It's all of the Chora trees. And so I think, the ways were grown really before the Tree of Life was a thing, wasn't it? Maybe after. Because there used to be a lot of Chora trees, and then Avendosora just became the last one. Prozac trees, yes, exactly. The fact that you have these trees that basically calm you down. So the Way of the Leaf and Avendosora and Chora trees all sort of tie together.
Buttoning up his coat, Perrin paused, looking at the axe, still secured on the wall as he left it since drawing it out of the door. He did not like the idea of carrying the weapon again, but he untied the belt from the peg and buckled it around his waist anyway. The hammer he tied to his already stuffed saddlebags. Draping saddlebags and blanket roll over his shoulder, he gathered a filled quiver and his unstrung longbow from the corner. The rising sun poured heat and light through the narrow windows. The rumpled bed was the only proof that anyone had stayed here. Already, the room had lost the feel of him. It even seemed to smell empty, despite his own scent on the sheets. He never stayed anywhere long enough to make that feel cling past his readiness to leave. Never long enough to put down roots, make it any kind of home. Well, going home now. Turning his back on the already unoccupied room, he went out. Gaul rose easily from where he had been squatting against the wall beneath a tapestry of men on horseback hunting lions. He bore all his weapons, with 2 leather water bottles, and a rolled blanket, and a small cookpot were strapped beside the worked leather bow case on his back. He was alone. The others? Perrin asked, and Gaul shook his head. Too long away from the threefold land. I warned you of that, Perrin. These lands of yours are too wet. The air is like breathing water. There are too many people, too close together. They have seen more than they want of strange places. I understand, Perrin said, though what he understood was that there would be no rescue after all, no company of Aiel to drive the White Cloaks out of the 2 rivers. He kept his disappointment aside. It was sharp, after thinking he had escaped his fate, but he could not say he had not prepared himself for the alternative. No point in crying when the iron split. You just reforged it. Did you have any trouble doing what I asked? None. I told one Terran to take each thing you want to the Dragon Wall Gate stable, and tell no one of it. They will have seen one another there, but they will think the things are for me, and they will keep silent. The Dragon Wall Gate. You would think the spine of the world was just over the horizon, instead of 100 leagues or more off. The Aiel hesitated. The girl and the Ogier make no secret of their preparations, Perrin. She has been trying to find the Gleeman, and telling everyone she means to travel the ways. Scratching his beard, Perrin breathed heavily, close to a growl. If she gives me away to Moraine, I vow she'll not sit down for a week. She's very handy with those knives, Gall said in a neutral tone. Not handy enough. Not if she's given me away. Perrin hesitated. No company of Aiel. The gallows still waited. Gall, if anything happens to me, if I give you the word, take Aiel away. She might not want to go, but take her anyway. See her safely out of the 2 rivers. Will you promise me that? I will do what I can, Perrin. For the blood debt I owe you. I will. Gall sounded doubtful, but Perrin did not think Aiel's knives would be enough to stop him. Of course, Gall is like, yeah, I have to fight 2 maidens and Aiel. If I do that. So, I'll do my best, which...
Well, but Perrin doesn't at this point know that the 2 maidens are with Aiel.
Yeah, but
So
Gall does.
Gall does.
Yeah.
So Gall keeps giving him like the skeptical, like, I can try. Don't think I can do it.
And he's saying, I will try.
Oh, yeah, he will definitely try. Yeah. But it's 2-on-1 odds and
2-on-3.
2-on-3, technically.
If you count Aiel.
Right. Which, she's no slouch. She's not great with the knives, but she's no slouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he had Gall arranged to gather all the equipment they need, like the poles and the saddlebags and all that kind of stuff for the travel, to hide it from Moraine. Do you think he was successful? Do you think Moraine knew he was leaving? Like, do you think she's okay with it? I feel like she doesn't care. I feel like she's so focused on Rand that she's sort of letting Perrin do what he must and is just trusting in the pattern to drive them where they need to be.
I don't think she knows, but as soon as I knew as soon as I was going to say that out loud, like, but she knows everything. And to be fair, a ton has gone down in the last 24 hours. So it wouldn't be out of bounds, I feel like, to say that she may just have a lot. She has a lot on her plate right now.
And everything's happening very quickly, and her focus is definitely not on Perrin. And she's been healing and fighting, so she's probably exhausted.
Right, and somewhere around now, she's talking to Tom.
Sure.
Gall tells Perrin about the 2 maidens who have decided to hang around with Aiel while she does this trip. And Gall kind of makes it clear, like, and listen, they're with her, not with us, so...
Yeah.
And Perrin says, Are they why you said you would try? Are they why you only said you would try? Perrin asked quietly. Gall shrugged. I will do what I can, but they will take her side. Chiad is Goshen. Her clan makes a difference? Perrin responds. Gall says, Her clan and mine have a blood feud, Perrin, and I am no spear sister to her. But perhaps the Water Oaths will hold her. I will not dance spears with her unless she offers.
No, I just, I love the beginning of the relationship between the 3 of them here. That, like, there's this whole parallel relationship between Perrin and Aiel, and then the maidens and Gall. Yeah. They're all sort of young teenagers and 20-somethings. Well, I don't think, Gall, I thought it was, like, mid-20s. I didn't think he was that much older than
I don't remember. I was picturing him as more like early 30s, but I really don't know.
Because I thought Ruark was early 30s, and he feels much older.
Ruark was born in 974. So what year is it? 998 right now? 99?
99 at this point, yeah.
So he's 25. 25. That is not what I was expecting. Gall explains the blood feud. Bane says they wish to see more of your lands, but I think it is the argument between you and Aiel which fascinates them. They like her, and when they heard of this journey, they decided to go with her instead of you. Well, as long as they keep her out of trouble. He was surprised when Gall threw back his head and laughed. It made him scratch his beard worriedly.
Weird Aiel humor there.
No idea why that's funny.
Because those maidens are going to get her into trouble, not keep her out of it. It's like throwing a kid in a dirt field on a rainy day and saying, maybe that'll keep him clean.
Loyal came toward them, long eyebrows sagging anxiously. His coat pockets bulged, as usual, when he was traveling, mainly with the angular shapes of books. At least his limp seemed better. Aiel is becoming impatient, Perrin, I think. She might insist on leaving any minute. Please hurry. You could not find the Waygate without me. Not that you should try, certainly. You humans make me leap about so I can hardly find my own head. Please hurry. I will not leave him, Aiel called, not even if he is yet too stubborn and foolish to ask a simple favor. Should that be the case, he may still follow me like a lost puppy. I promised to scratch his ears and take care of him. The Aiel women doubled over laughing.
Good boy. I'm scratching Timber's ears. By the way, Timber is once again sitting in my lap for this podcast. He is not small enough to be a lapdog, and yet this appears to be the only way to keep him from whining at me while we're recording.
Gull says, "We will follow like stalking ridge cats," he yells back. "Like hunting wolves."
The back and forth between these two groups is so much fun sometimes.
It's cute.
Between the Aiel, at least.
Bane nods in approval, and she's like, "Yes, I have several fine wolf skins that line my my bed back home."
In context, that's a funny response, but maybe not appropriate around Perrin.
Perrin growls.
It really kind of pisses him off. You don't talk about skinning wolves around Perrin. That's a bad idea.
For a moment, Payne looked on the point of saying something more, but she frowned at his yellow stare and held her peace. Not afraid, but suddenly wary.
Suddenly.
"This puppy is not well housebroken yet," Fael confided to the Aiel women. It's like when your dog jumps on someone and was like, sorry, we're working on that.
I just got him. He's, Perrin talks a little bit about why he doesn't understand why Aiel won't ride horses.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if that was just, the thought came to me that maybe that's passed down from when they used to ride wagons, and the wagons basically were for carrying all the stuff, all the ter'angreal, and then I never really understood why Aiel don't ride horses. From a practical perspective, I mean, they don't really survive in the waste.
Right. So they don't know anything about horses. You'd have to, right, like Ferenghi's saying, they'd have to feed them on pasture that they don't have. And I would think it's the same reason that I'm weirded out and nervous around horses, because I, grew up mainly in cities, and I don't have any experience with them. They're giant. They scare easily. If you just make them a little bit nervous, they can kick you and you're dead. And
I guess I've always thought of horses as big dogs and never really had an issue with them. But I haven't also spent a lot of time around them, so I don't have any basis for that either.
Yeah, and I know that I'm afraid because of my ignorance, but also, I don't know. I'm watching what Discord says, see if anyone has good ideas. Great question, Ogier tendencies. There are no camels in Wat. Well, as far as we see.
I bet they're in Sahara. I mean,
Shara.
Shara. The Sahara Desert.
I never put that together, but yeah, Sahara, Shara. Morgaine says horses need a ton of water. Yeah, but all that
They
stuff,
do,
though,
yeah.
it doesn't really answer Seth's question, which is why I'm still on this, because I feel like I haven't answered it. Like, the reason that they can't raise horses and be trained on horses is pretty clear. But why do they dislike the idea of being walked for so much?
Right.
Pride, Sean-chan. Travis says it too. Yeah, I mean, maybe. All right, 3 people just said pride. I'm going to head nod to that and move on, because I can't think of a better reason.
Sure. Well, and I think a lot about heat and the idea that walking upright helps saves us from overheating much more than a 4-footed animal, because so much smaller percentage of our cross-section is exposed to the sun. Not to mention bipedal movement is much more efficient than
Yeah,
using 4
horses
feet.
are no good in a desert, and we know
Nope.
that the Aiel can run a horse to death.
And that's especially true when it's hotter. Like, I think we talked about that with the endurance races, is like it's much more likely that a human wins if the temperature is like 3 degrees warmer,
Yeah.
because people are much better at just shedding heat. We sweat and we don't absorb as much from the sun. I think the
There's a great,
the David
Attenborough.
Attenborough, yeah. that one's fantastic.
By the way, I have started. I think I can get back to marathon level in a year. And I've never run a marathon, so who knows? I might blow out my knee. But I have run a couple of halves, and I was fine. I'm not there yet. I ran like 3 miles the other day.
Yeah, that's why you've got 2 knees, in case you blow that one out.
LOL.
Yeah.
I'll just hop the rest of the way. Wow, Travis.
Travis, that's a good theory. That when the Aiel warriors picked up the spears, they were cast away from the wagons, and they guard the wagons, they guard the gen, but they are not allowed to use the wagons or use the horses.
And he says, I think the denial of horses at that point made them too prideful to ride them.
Travis, that is a well-constructed theory.
Like, oh, we can't use the horses? Well, we don't need your horses.
Keep your stinking horses.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's as the best argument that we've heard so far, for sure. Better than anything I came up with.
So they're getting ready to go, and suddenly the stone rings like a bell. That's the next thing I have.
When Fail finally mounted, in her narrow, divided skirts, she reined closer to Perrin. She rode well, woman and horse moving as one. "Why can you not ask, Perrin?" she said softly. "You tried to keep me away from where I belong, so now you have to ask. Can such a simple thing be so difficult?" The stone rang like a monstrous bell, the stable floor leaping, and the ceiling quivering on the point of coming down. Stepper leapt too, screaming, head flailing. It was all Perrin could do to keep his seat. Grooms scrambled off the floor where they had fallen and ran desperately to quiet horses rearing, shrieking, attempting to climb out of their stalls. Loyal clung to the neck of his huge mount, but Fail sat swallow surely as the mare danced and squealed wildly. Rand. Perrin knew it was him. The pool of Taverin dragged at him, two whirlpools in a stream drawing one another. Coughing in the falling dust, he shook his head as hard as he could, straining not to dismount and run back up into the stone. "We ride," he shouted while tremor still shook the fortress. "We ride now! Loyal! Now!" Fail seemed to see no more point in delay. She heeled her mare out of the stable beside Loyal's taller horse. Their two pack animals pulled along, all galloping before they reached the Dragonwall gate. The defenders took one look and scattered, some still on hands and knees. It was their duty to keep people out of the stone, and they had no orders to keep these in. Not that they would necessarily have been able to think straight enough to do so, if they had had orders. Not with tremors still subsiding and the stone still groaning above them. Perrin was right behind with his own pack horse, wishing the Oegir's animal could run faster, wishing he could leave Loyal's lumbering mount behind and outrun the suction to draw him back. That pull of Taverin to Taverin. They galloped together through the streets of Tyr, toward the rising sun, barely slowing to avoid carts and carriages. Men in tight coats and women in layered aprons, still shaken by the upheaval, stared at them, dazed, sometimes barely leaping out of the way.
And I want to match that with the scene where Rand plunges the sword into the stone, because that's what's happening. We got a quote earlier that Rand was holding his meeting in the stone while Perrin was leaving. And that's actually a couple of chapters away, but let me read that little bit. The crowd flinched as he lifted the crystal blade before his face. Sweat rolled down his face, much more sweat than before. The stone held Kalendor before I came. The stone should hold it again until I return. Suddenly the transparent sword blazed in his hands. Whirling it hilt uppermost, he drove it down, into the stone floor. Bluish lightning arced wildly towards the dome above. The stone, small s, rumbled loudly, and the stone, big S, shook, dancing, heaving, screaming people from their feet. So that's the cause of the quake that Perrin is fleeing.
Rand makes the stone ring like a bell when he slams Kalendor into the ground. Fail's nervous that the Aiel won't be able to catch them because they were sprinting on horses, and the Aiel show up in a moment, of course.
I thought this was an interesting subject because I think this is really the first time that Fail realizes just how good Perrin's eyesight is. Because she's like really skeptical. She's like, yeah, right. Those aren't the Aiel. That's just three random people.
It's like, yeah, they're right behind us. I can see them. And she turns to Loyal and says, "He is very boastful of his eyesight," she told Loyal, "but his memory is not very good. At times I think he would forget to light a candle at night if I did not remind him, because he doesn't need one."
Right.
You're the only one that needs a candle, Fail.
He only lights one to trick people into thinking that he needs the light.
And not too many minutes later, Fail stared at Perrin as the three Aiel drew close enough for her to make out, but she said nothing.
How dare he be right about that? How dare he?
The Aiel were not even breathing hard when they slowed to a halt beside the horses. "Too bad it wasn't a longer run," Bane says.
Yeah, because he probably would have caught it.
And of course they say, "Too bad it wasn't a longer run. Otherwise we would have run this stone dog into the ground," Chiad said, as if finishing the other woman's sentence. "That is why stone dogs take their vows not to retreat. Stone bones and stone heads make them too heavy to run."
It's a good insult. Good insult. That's a deep burn.
They don't retreat because they're too slow.
They're too heavy. They're just stubborn.
Gaul took no offense, though Perrin noticed he stood where he could keep an eye on Chiad. Do you know why maidens are so often used as scouts, Perrin? Because they can run so far, and that comes from being afraid of some man who might want to marry them. A maiden will run 100 miles to avoid that. Very wise of them, Thail said tartly.
Burn and burn.
Burns all around, I like that.
And I like how Gaul's keeping an eye on Bane because she's, quote, an enemy, and yet he's just watching her all the time. Until suddenly he has a crush on her.
Chiad. It's Chiad.
Chiad. What'd I say?
Bane.
Yeah.
I just went back to double check. I can't remember which is which either. They are the same in my head, basically. They just come as a pair.
Right.
They're always together.
Whenever you have one character finishing another sentences and they are always together and never apart. It's same thing with Van Dien and Adelius. It's one character. Van Dien and Adelius is one character. Bane and Chiad are one character.
I wish there was more good fan art of them.
Ogier Tendencies is pointing out that Chiad is playing with her hair while looking at Gaul.
I didn't notice that.
I didn't either. So they're traveling through the country for a while through what used to be an Ogier Grove and is now Grey's Land, and that's sets off a whole paragraph of Loyal muttering about how his precious forests.
Mm-hmm. Gone. All gone, and for what? Grass. I'll leave that. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he rants for a whole paragraph.
Right.
Which is unusual for him. He doesn't even really get emotional, generally.
Only when it comes to his groves and trees.
Angry.
He gets... I wouldn't want to deal with an angry Trolloc. Or an angry Ogier.
Angry Ogier's worse.
Hell yeah.
Men think it is the stonework we prize, but that is a trifling thing, learned during the long exile, all caps, after the breaking. It is the trees we love. Men thought Manetheren my people's greatest triumph, but we knew it to be the grove there. Gone. Now. Like this. Gone. And it will never come again.
A little bitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it will come again. The wheel turns. Ages come and pass. The groves will return. I did like the saying, to anger the Ogier and pull the mountains down on your head.
Yeah.
As a saying in terms of like, well, that used to be something that we thought was impossible, right? It's like lifting yourself up by your bootstraps, you know? It's something that's like just not possible to do.
Right.
But it's taken on a different meaning from what it originally had, which was if you pull a mountain down on your head, you'll be dead because you'll be crushed by rocks.
Right.
And if you piss off an Ogier, you'll be dead because you'll be crushed by Ogier.
Almost as hard as rocks.
I think I'd rather deal with a mountain.
But I'll read the Waygate opening, of course, because it's always kind of awesome. And then the readout after that. And there was the Waygate. Rearing against the side of the hill, it appeared more a length of grey wall than a gate, and the wall of a palace at that, thickly carved in leaves and vines so finely done that they seemed almost as alive as the bushes had been, because Loyal had to pull away a bunch of brush that was growing around the Waygate. 3,000 years at least it had stood there, but not a trace of weathering marred its surface.
Of course, he feels bad about pulling the brush aside because he killed trees.
Those leaves could have rippled with the next breeze. For a moment, they all stared at it silently, until Loyal took a deep breath and put his hand on the one leaf that was different from any other on the Waygate. Help me guys, trefoil?
Yeah, trefoil.
The trefoil leaf of a Vendosora, the fabled tree of life. Until the moment his huge hand touched it, it seemed as much a part of the carving as all the rest, but it came away easily. Fail gasped loudly, and even the Aiel murmured. The air was full of the smell of unease. There was no saying who it came from. All of them, perhaps. The stone leaves did seem to stir from an unfelt breeze now. They took a tinge of green, of life. Slowly, a split appeared down the middle, and the halves of the Waygate opened out, revealing not the hill behind, but a dull shimmering that faintly reflected their images. Once, it is said, Loyal murmured, the Waygate shone like mirrors, and those who walked the ways walked through the sun and sky. Gone, now, like this grove. Hastily pulling one of the filled pole arms from his pack-horse, Perrin got a delight. It is too hot out here, he said. A little shade would be good. He booted Stepper toward the Waygate. He thought he heard Fail gasp again.
I don't have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. Then I just have the readout.
He goes into the gateway. sort of jumps ahead of Fail because he's a little more used to what's going on, and so I think she's got a moment of shock when the gateway opens, and he takes that moment to jump the gun.
She has no idea how it works. She's never seen this before or anything. So
he's the old hand. He's the experienced guy. He's been through the ways once before. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, as much as maybe anyone else alive, but only once. Yes.
True. There's very few people who made it through sane.
And I did notice that Gaul goes through right after, who's parents' protector. So, of course, Fail begins by falling behind. She's supposed to be leading the whole time.
And after he goes in, Gaul reports, yeah, you kind of pissed her off. So you know she's out there being like, that damn bloody Perrin went in before me. He's supposed to follow. He's violated the agreement. He was following me. I'm
Perrin's
leading the
like,
party. Yeah,
Gaul, we didn't agree to shit. She's just throwing a fit.
Right.
Gaul stepped through calmly and began preparing another lantern. Behind him was what seemed like a sheet of smoked glass. The others were visible out there. Loyal getting back on his horse. Fail gathering her reins. All of them creeping, barely moving. Time was different inside the ways. Fail is upset with you, Gaul said, once he had his lantern alight. It did not add much illumination. The darkness drank in light, swallowed it. She seems to think you have broken some sort of agreement. Bane and Chiad, do not let them get you alone. They mean to teach you a lesson for Fail's sake, and you will not sit on that animal so easily if they manage what they plan. I agreed to nothing, Gaul. I do what she's forced me to do, through trickery. We will have to follow Loyal as she wants soon enough, but I mean to take the lead for as long as I can. He pointed to a thick white line under Stepper's hooves. Broken and heavily pitted, it led off ahead, vanishing into the blackness only a few feet away. That leads to the first guidepost. We will need to wait there for Loyal to read it and decide which bridge to take, but Fail can follow us that far. Bridge, Gaul murmured thoughtfully. I know that word. There's water here? No, it isn't exactly that kind of bridge. They look the same, sort of, but maybe Loyal can explain it. The Aielman scratched his head. Do you know what you are doing, Perrin? No, Perrin admitted, but there's no reason for Fail to know that. Gaul laughed. It is fun to be so young, is it not, Perrin? Frowning, uncertain whether the man was laughing at him, Perrin heeled Stepper on, drawing the pack-horse behind. The lantern light would not be visible at all in here 20 or 30 paces from its edge. He wanted to be completely out of sight before Fail came through. Let her think he had decided to go on without her. If she worried for a few minutes, until she found him at the guidepost, it was the least she deserved. I liked that, and in this case I understand why Gaul is laughing. When Gaul says, you understand what you're doing, right? And Perrin's like, no. And Gaul's like, oh, fuck. It's fun to be young, right?
Yeah.
And Perrin's a little younger than Gaul. Gaul's not that much older.
No.
But they're also like, they're two young warriors who are throwing themselves into blatant danger, and they have no idea what they're doing. And he's just like, all right, let's do this crazy thing. Like, Gaul's excited to face death.
It kind of reminds me of two people about hang glide for the first time.
Shit, here we go.
Here we go. Are you ready to jump? Yep, let's do it. Okay. You've done this before, right? Nope.
I'm afraid to. Okay, let's go.
Me too, yeah. No, it's nervous laughter going on.
And I think, I get it. Like, yeah, it's like hang gliding or doing something crazy like that.
Jumping off a bridge.
Yeah, jumping out of an airplane, even though you know that parachute's attached to you. You're jumping out of an airplane, man. I don't think the knowing about the parachute doesn't make it any easier.
How much do you trust that parachute?
How much do you think you should trust that parachute? You know what I'm saying? Part of me is like, I don't think I want to skydive.
How much do you trust yourself to pull that cord at the right time?
Yeah.
Or not get caught in a tree or a power line or
you get that 1 out of 20,000 defective parachutes, or 1 out of 1,000,000, or whatever.
Caught in a downdraft, or some other idiot jumps out of a plane and gets tangled up with you. Like, there are risks that we take every day in order to live our lives, and we have to pretty much pretend those risks don't exist. Like, every time you get in the car, you risk horrible, horrible death.
Oh, Talia, just for the record, skydiving is on my list of things to do before I die. Because it's crazy. And, you go with a professional. They know what the fuck.
I have no interest whatsoever. Flying a plane, on the other hand, I think I would very much enjoy.
I mean, possibly cooler than falling out of one.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like with the parachute, the thing is you have no control, which I know isn't true. You have some steering.
Yeah, I would not go without a person with me to do everything for me. I want to fall out of the sky. It's amazing.
You are welcome to it. And I hope you have fun.
There's a bunch of places in Eastern Oregon where you can do it for pretty cheap.
I'm also not much of a roller coaster person,
Oh, I love roller coasters.
Yeah, I've been on them, and I'm not like against roller coasters.
Yeah, I love roller coasters. There's something about that, it's also why I like to jump off a high cliff into water.
Mm.
Once I watch several people do it and realize that you're not going to die, then you have to make yourself do it because it's still scary as hell. But there's something primal that happens while you're flying through the air, and there's something happens to your brain. I don't know how to explain it.
I think it's called, oh shit,
It's
I'm going to die.
Fear and awe. Euphoria is maybe a better way to say it, Ferengi, because it's like a good feeling, but it's also a scary feeling. I don't know how to describe
I'm going to go with adrenaline rush.
Adrenaline? Maybe that's it. I think I have said on the podcast before that if I ever get the opportunity to shoot up adrenaline, that is the only intravenous drug that I would do. Whoa, it's probably crazy. If I ever got the chance, I'd be like, yeah, give me a couple cc's of that weird shit.
There are only two things I enjoy: serotonin and dopamine.
Well, I mean, yeah. Get enough of that dopamine in your system, you won't even care about having an exciting time. The only other, non-dangerous thing I can compare it to is a runner's high, which is different. It's more of a feeling of peace than a bright flash. But that's what I love about it so much. Every moment that I'm awake, my conscious is running. There's always if this then that, if that then this, and this happens, so now there's this whole running dialogue that's happening. This is true for everyone. But when you jump off that cliff and you start falling off, it's nothing. You are in the world falling. That's all. There's no thoughts. It's amazing. It just shuts off. You're just an animal in the world. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, and so where I was at was the ATC says it's legit that if you don't, there's two options when you approach the south end of the Shenandoah, or the north end potentially, but really the south end because the Shenandoah River runs north, one of the few rivers that does so. You can either get a canoe and canoe up the Shenandoah through the Shenandoah Valley, or you can hike over the spine of the mountains. Either way, it still counts as a legit through hike. If you canoe that, I don't remember now, 100 and some odd mile section, something like that. And so with the people that I was with at the time, I said guys, but they were only we were 3/4 guys. Took the opportunity to do that. Long story short, somewhere late in the trip, we pulled up on this little beach. There was some nice grass where we could camp, and we built a little fire ring. Cool. Started the fire, and we're running out of firewood rapidly, so half of us wander off into the woods to go pull some dry wood out of there. I'm walking along the riverbank because I know from experience that that's a really good place to find dry wood. It'll often be caught up in trees from the floodwaters, wintertime and stuff.
It sits there and dries out.
Up high, so it sits there, dries out in the sun. It's perfect. So walk up to this tree, and there's a ton of it. I'd turn a bend and wow, a lot of good wood. Great, this is awesome. And I jump up and grab a limb, so I'm like kind of hanging off the tree, and I grab a piece of the wood in the tree and just like force myself back with my legs on the tree, you know, to pull this whole thing down so I can start dragging it away. Pull everything down, drop to the ground, and suddenly the air is filled with these gray specks all around me, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then pain shooting down my right side. I'll never forget that shit. And I'm like, bees, 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 and I'm sprinting down the beach like yelling at everyone, bees, bees, bees. And I run up to this rock and I jumped into the river like face first.
Yeah,
just jumped in there, and I swam like deep under, and I tried to swim like out into the middle of the river, and like I stick my face back up, like kinda, you know, like I'm trying to stay down. And I mean, I got back and I had like probably like a dozen stings just all over my right shoulder, which was the arm that I snatched the branch and yanked.
You mean the beehive that you snatched? Yeah.
Which was hidden in all the leaves and dry sticks that were stuck in the Y of this tree. Yeah. It hurt a lot. My arm throbbed for, well, all night.
For some reason, I picture Oprah standing there going, bees!
Bees for everyone!
Yeah.
I'm lucky, though, that my skin doesn't really react to, like, stings and insect bites. I know a lot of people, like, their whole arm would swell from a thing like that, but the next day for me, it was just like I had a dozen or a dozen and a half pimples all over my arm. It's not so bad.
Painful pimples, probably.
Yeah, well, at first,
Yeah.
it's, man, every time I get stung by a bee, I'm like, get ready for it. You know what this is like. And then it happens, and you're like, whoa, my God. How does that hurt so bad?
I really the only two things I've felt that hurt like that are being stung by a bee and being kicked in the balls. It's that same, like, aching, long-term, makes you sick to your stomach pain.
Yeah, it's like, it's hard to describe, but it's almost like getting pricked by a needle, if the needle was the bee stinger, but it's on fire at the same time.
And it, like, injects fire into the whole
Like if that needle was
bump.
blue hot and
Yeah.
then it jabbed into you, that's what it feels like. Except
And stayed there and stayed hot.
it's just that pain venom that is incredibly effective.
The chemical triggering our nerve, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
How well it works.
Works really, really well. That's how the bees say go away.
It works.
Yeah.
You know, if they had just asked. Like, cool, guys.
Like,
You don't have to start swinging. Jesus.
I'm picturing cartoon bees doing, like, spelling out words in the air. Go away. I know everyone, like, is down on wasps, and, like, okay, fuck wasps. I get that. But I'll tell you what, fire ants are the real bastards of the insect kingdom.
I grew up in the wrong part of the world to have a lot of experience with those, but
A, they swarm. B, they're impossible to kill. And C, the way they sting you is they take their big pincher jaws, clamp down on your skin, which A, hurts, and then use their butts to sting you repeatedly.
oh,
And
really?
so-
they have a stinger too?
Yeah, so they clamp down on you and then sting repeatedly in the same spot. And so you can get swarmed by fire ants and have like 10 times as many stings as ants. It's just, it's so awful. And they're so painful.
Wow, I just Googled a picture. Don't Google this. That looks incredibly painful.
Ogier Tendencies says they are tasty snacks for woodpeckers. But no, I was, when I lived in Texas, I was hanging eggs on a tree plastic eggs on a tree for Easter. And I was looking up in the tree and was standing in a red ant's nest. And they swarmed up my leg and basically covered my leg and started stinging. And
I had a cousin who grew up
Yeah.
in the Southwest who was afraid of ants until he was like 15.
I'm
For
terrified
that
of them.
reason.
Yeah, they're awful. I hate them. I think my parents grabbed me and like put me in the tub and like just rinsed me off but
There's not much you can do.
no, I mean, you just get them off and then you're in pain for a while and hope you don't, die. South in America has some real nasty bugs.
Yeah, it just has to do with the climate, guys.
Yeah.
On the same trip, I'm not going to tell the whole story, but we ended up having to push our canoes out at dusk, like as the sun was setting. And so we turned on our headlamps, and we had to move a little ways downriver because some rangers showed up and they were like, hey, you can't camp here, but if you pull out and go a little further, you can camp down there. We're like, all right, fine, because you don't mess with them. They're cops, you know.
Right.
They're armed.
Really?
Yeah. And we had our headlamps on while we were moving down the river, and we started getting pelted with these. They were like, I did a bunch of research after this, and I'm not sure if I have this right, but I think they were giant walking sticks is what they're called, or something like that. I don't know if this is what they were, but they started like dropping out of the sky toward our headlamps, which are attached to our faces. And so we were getting pelted with these crazy looking bugs that were just like, I can't even believe this exists in the real world.
Oh, I'll tell you my story, the other Texas story. So I've been a swimmer and my whole life, and in Texas, you'd go swimming in outdoor pools. There were no such thing as indoor pools because it never got really cold enough to have an indoor pool. It was just nice to be outside. And so in the summer, the June bugs would swarm. And what they do is they'd leave the lights on in the pool all night. And so the June bugs would be attracted to the light and swarm right into the pool and drown and die.
Right.
To the point where
you told me about this
we'd
before.
get there in the morning.
So gross.
And the coach would say, okay, dive in. And you'd literally be looking at a carpet of dead beetles to the point where you could not see the surface of the water.
So
it was coated corner to corner.
I am not a squeamish
beetles.
person, but
And coach is like, dive on in. And you're like, no. And so what you have to do is you spend the first couple of laps swimming like a modified breaststroke with your head out of the water, just pushing the beetles to the side and getting them into the lane lines. And then you're really, really, really careful when you breathe for the rest of the day, because I definitely swallowed a couple of June bugs that way.
I think last time you told that story, I told the story about goose poop on the football field.
Yeah.
From morning warm-ups on top of goose poop.
Of course, I will say I also had one of my most beautiful nights in that pool. I was doing a backstroke during a lunar eclipse, and it was this beautiful, clear night, and I got to watch a lunar eclipse while swimming. And we made the coach give us a backstroke set so we could watch the moon. And that was cool. That was the first eclipse I ever saw. So outdoor pools are nice for that reason.
For some reasons, but not for all.
But not for all. just turn the lights off at night. That's all you gotta do.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?